Hello, hello. This is Gods of Warhammer, the Chaos Gods. I've really been into Warhammer lately. I've been playing a lot of Skaven, and I see the Great Horned Rat here. I know a lot about the fantasy lore, but I could know more, I guess. So this is Pancreas Nowhere. Go support him, and
The most fun thing
without further ado, let's get into it. Zah. My dog is growling for some reason.
about the non-marine parts of Chaos is that I can trick people into watching fantasy lore without needing to specify that it's Warhammer Fantasy. The second most fun thing is that your demon's army can get some amount of mileage in 3 games. That's economical fun right there, and the relentless march of time aging me into the dirt has made that kind of thing appealing to me. But the third most fun thing is that they're simple and cool villains. Sometimes a character will try and say Chaos has the moral high ground, and on even rarer occasions they may be approaching something resembling being right. Most of the time, they're just fun goobers. Why do we burn down the orphanages? Because it's a good way to unwind after burning down a fortress. Why are you wearing a skin coat? Well, why aren't you wearing a skin coat?
Exactly. That's how Warhammer is.
Sometimes being blatantly evil and reveling in it is clean, easy fun, and I'm sure at least a few of you are fondly thinking of the Overlord games right now in a
Played the fuck out of this game when I was like 13, I think. Loved it.
agreement. So let's look at all the wonderful Chaos Gods the setting has to throw at you, since they're the ones backing all those aforementioned goobers.
Okay, I see Korn, Slanesh, Zinch, Nurgle.
After all, though Chaos has plenty of gods
Okay.
out
And here it's Korn, Zanech, Nurgle, or Zinch, Nurgle, Slanesh, Korn, and then the Great Horned Rat.
there. The big four, and maybe one other, warrants their own video without anyone else muscling in on their turf. So whether you want bloody skulls, magical power, endless pleasure, or being a fat sack of disease,
Skulls with a
these
skull
four beings of
throne.
unrivaled power have something for you. But before we talk about lore, how about we talk about how you can get yourself some quality grub? Vactor, the sponsor of this video. Vactor is the premier for only meals, and of course, it was in fact just a rest and a great I've just beef pancreas year. If you want to eat right, now then, let's get a little bit heretical. No sense in beating around the bush with chaos, so why don't we get right
honey,
into it?
quit.
Starting, of course, with what is most often GW's favorite
Just
chaos
them kids
god.
playing with toys.
The god of warfare, honor, murder, and of course, blood and skulls. Those last two things may or may not be given a bit too much prominence, depending on the writer in question, but at the same time, his battle cry is so catchy I can't really blame anyone for focusing entirely on those last two things. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. It's a bit wordy, but
Blood
it's so
for the
good
blood
and it gets the
god.
point across so well that, hell, I'm sure most people aware of Chaos in-universe think that's all Khorne cares about. Khorne does have a bit more going for him than that, though. Even if just a bit. In fantasy, the Chaos Gods have theoretically always existed, which according to the End Times and Age of Sigmar lore is because they're on an eternal road trip to ruin different realities, and fantasy just happens to be one they got stuck in for a while. There is a storytelling of his birth in the Libra Chaotica, which boils down to a bunch of armies going insane murdering each other as Khorne eventually coalesces and screams his name, but that likely is no longer quite canon. Over in 40k, the Chaos Gods supposedly used to all have starting points. Chaos being what it is, once they were born they always existed, but at the same time there were points when there wasn't a Khorne, and then there was a Khorne all of a sudden. In his case, this was around the time of the early Middle Ages, when Crusaders ran rampant and Genghis Khan decided he would quite like to own everything ever. Genghis Khan might actually be one of Khorne's first demon princes as a fellow named Doombreed, in fact, but he could also be any other number of famous people known for being good at war. GW's never going to commit to Genghis Khan being a demon, cool as it might be. Ever since then, Khorne has empowered those who want to stand above the rest in the bloodiest way possible. If you want to smash your enemies, to lay them low and hear the lamentations of their women and all that Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff, you go to Khorne. In some ways, he's the easiest chaos god to worship and gain power from, because it really can be boiled down to him having you go smash things until he's content enough to lend you a hand. To get more powerful, you just have to go smash bigger and better things, or at least go from smashing a squad of soldiers to an entire battalion of them.
So, I kill an army, I get a blessing. I kill a bigger thing, I get a blessing. I think is what he says. At the end of this, I'll tell you what Chaos God I would side with.
In other ways, he's the hardest to get power from in worship, because it's very easy to say just go wipe out an entire army on your own, and another thing entirely to actually do it. Also, that mentality, in fact, is where one of Khorne's most prominent facets comes into play, his hatred of wizards and psykers. If you want strength from Khorne to wipe out your enemies, you kind of need to prove to him first that you could have done it anyways. If you want the power to rip a giant apart with your bare hands, you need to go kill one first. There are no shortcuts to power with Khorne, and for all his detractors may claim that he and his followers are stupid brutes, there's no denying that any Khornate with their god-given power has earned every drop of it. With other gods, especially Tzeentch, they may wave their hands and make you the most powerful person for light years around.
Bird.
It might be because you're a linchpin for their plans in the area, and it'd be great if you have some extra firepower, but it might also be because they're bored and find it funny. At the end of the day, though, they didn't do anything to get it, and even for normal wizards and psykers, they're still using the power of the warp to win a fight. With Khorne, magic is cheating. That isn't your power, you're stealing power from the gods in their realm to cheat everyone out of a good clean fight. On top of that, the man who cast a spell to turn people into frogs has proven nothing except for the fact that magic can turn people into frogs, and in the process, the blood god has been robbed of everything he wants. He doesn't just hate wizards because he's a big silly moron, he hates them because they go against his fundamental nature. And Khorne really isn't a moron. Khornate characters being dumb brutes is just a bit of a two-parter problem. One of those problems is simply bad writing, or at least people not getting creative with the concept of Khorne. The writing process that grants us the classic Khornate berserker oftentimes tends to look like Khorne is the god of war, so he must approach all his problems like OG Kratos did. It's writers forgetting that a war deity can also be someone like Athena, violent, sure, but willing to think. The other reason that plays into it as well is that someone is corrupted more and more by Khorne, they tend to lose their minds, and that's how in-universe Khornates become stupid. They lose themselves to bloodlust until the only thing left in their brains is to charge forward and start slaughtering, because anything more complicated than that is more time before they get their next fix of slaughter. Those able to hold off this influence can still find all the favor in the world from Khorne, even if they do use actual tactics and strategy. A man who pulls off the most stunning ambush in the world will be blessed by Khorne, for he has gifted the blood god a great harvest of skulls. If you 1v1 snipers only on Rust, Khorne is greatly pleased, because what is that if not the
Many a times I faced my friends on this map, whoop they ass, even though they might say different.
ultimate test of martial skill between two warriors? Khorne probably loves scientists of a certain type, not the ones who mess around with weird warp nonsense or cure diseases, the ones who wake up and go, I want to make the biggest bomb ever, and then proceed to delve into quantum physics and how to figure it out. After all, they're putting their natural environment and skills, even if intellectual skills, on figuring out how to make the most destructive thing ever. Azariah Kairos is going to ascend to Demon Princehood through Exterminatus after all, so even if you think I'm taking it too far, the idea of killing people beyond just cutting their heads off is completely valid to Khorne. All he wants is blood and or skulls.
Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. But give you a heads up, it's like 2 days after Christmas, so kids are playing with their toys.
As long as you don't use magic, anything is fair game. I bet he'd absolutely love Halo's elites because their honor system isn't stupid. It's using all their abilities the best they can, including stealth and ambushes and artillery bombarding you from orbit, to win the day. Khorne's also simple because overcomplicating things is actually the worst thing a commander can do. No matter what their fans say, people like Tzeentch and the Alpha Legion would be some of the worst operatives to ever exist. The more steps you have to a plan, the more things that can go wrong, and at Khorne's most simplistic, there are 0 flaws in his plan. You run forward, and you cut everyone in front of you in half. There's nothing to go wrong with that plan beyond the capability of the forces involved to pull it off. And when Khorne's blessing means at least some of his followers can rip all 11 barrels of hell off a Baneblade and beat you to death with them, there generally doesn't need to be any more of a plan than that. In these ways, Khorne is also the fairest of the Chaos Gods, if not the nicest. The strongest rule over everyone else, and that's that. You have the power, so use it however you will. It's a violent, cruel, and animalistic hierarchy that he has, but survival of the fittest taken to the extreme is clearly a philosophy plenty of people can agree with, given how Khorne never has any shortage of followers. Sure, if you aren't actually as built differently as you thought you were, then you as a follower of Khorne will lose, but Khorne still wins. You've heard the line, no doubt. Khorne cares not from where the blood flows, only that it does. That line is why I think that for all some writers and people will tell you Slaanesh can eventually come out on top, she never will. I'll give her some credit when we get to her, but let's just be honest with ourselves here. Warhammer and all its incarnations is above all else a war game, and the settings exist to facilitate that. Except for Blood Bowl, where in the not-so-grim, moderate lighting of the old world, there's only football. Aside from that magical little setting, the entire point is that everyone is fighting all the time. 40k spells it out for you, with the grim darkness of the 41st millennium being only war, that classic line. Khorne gets strength from people going to war and blood being shed, and it doesn't seem like anyone in these settings is gonna stop shedding blood anytime soon. Khorne can be a disciplined fellow with all things said and done. The 8th host of his bloodthirsters are generals, and bloodletters march in utter disciplined silence when they aren't on the battlefield. It's just that, like I said, the plan is simple, so discipline is only needed for so long. In terms of carrying out that plan, Khornate forces can be ruthlessly efficient and disciplined, though, at least up until they're in the thick of things. Khorne himself
You got a point, you know, just go out and kill things. That's all you need to do.
as one of the major powers to be in all the Warhammer settings, is only so active. In select lore, there's some things like how he'd ride out on a hunt across the heavens with a souped-up flesh hound of his, but realistically, Khorne isn't really doing all that much on a day-to-day basis. Some people call him lazy for sitting on his skull throne and doing dick all, but while I still firmly hate Khornate armies on the tabletop, my opinion of the god himself has turned around a bit. So allow me to ramble a bit here for why he's not actually lazy. The first example I have against this is something that applies to all the Chaos Gods. The vast majority of demons are splinters of their parent god, with a very small amount of demon princes technically being a proper demon of some variety. Those fellows don't even make up a fraction of them, so we can safely ignore that. Whenever a demon of Khorne is taken to the field, that's technically Khorne himself throwing down, even if only a small part of him. Plus, imagine how much energy it takes to summon demons into the mortal world. Now scale all the way up to trying to bring forth Khorne himself, all the sacrifices needed to bring forth the blood god. At that point, you've already killed everyone. There's no longer a reason for him to be there. More specifically for him, though, I've said a few times Khorne isn't an idiot. Put quite simply, he doesn't need to get off his throne. He can sit there watching and waiting, granting power to some, taking it back from others. He knows damn well in these settings that blood will continue to be spilled, so why bother? Why move from his throne until the final showdown? In fantasy, he sat and waited until the end times came, and in 40k, he's still waiting for that final hurrah where everyone ever throws down and the galaxy comes to a screeching halt. Khorne isn't lazy, he's patient, as all good commanders should be. When he needs to fight, he will, as is shown in 40k when Slaanesh was born and she and Khorne fought over Cain. But otherwise, he'll wait for the time to be right. And hey, when Angron was coming back to 40k proper, because 40k will just be the Horus Heresy in about 10 years, Khorne used him as a conduit to drive an entire crusade fleet insane and begin killing each other. Just because he isn't swinging a sword around doesn't mean he's inactive, or he could be directing his forces. In Age of Sigmar, before Big S showed back up with the Stormcast, Khorne's forces declared war on the entire rest of Chaos at the same time. I have no doubt he was directing people to and from various places depending on which of the other gods was being dealt with at the time. Khorne, as all the Chaos Gods do, hates the other ones. They're all contenders to his rightful position on the top. All the Chaos Gods hate one other more than the rest, who in turn hates them just as much, and the relationship with the other two is generally bad but varied. In Khorne's case, he dislikes Tzeentch because Tzeentch uses magical nonsense to turn what should be an honorable battle into magical nonsense using power stolen from the gods. He dislikes Nurgle because that fat bastard is all about disease and sitting there just accepting things, not getting out there.
Okay, I don't know why Nurgle just took a random stray, but okay.
There and hitting the gym or making some bloody waves. Slaanesh, though, is where the main rivalry comes in. Slaanesh is all about pleasure and enjoyment, nothing else matters. Khorne wants you to go be an honorable, blood and skull kind of fella, and Slaanesh perverts things like that for petty entertainment on a win, rather than survival of the fittest to the extreme. His little corner of chaos is the Brass Citadel. There are cool things there, but I'll be honest with you, it's mostly just variations of blood, skull, fighting, and brass. A whole lot of demons and followers of his are murdering each other in front of his throne for power and approval. It's a constant war to prove who's the strongest. There's also Tuska Demon Killer hanging around killing Khorne's followers because Khorne, much like the Warhammer fanbase as a whole, finds those wacky green fellas to be kinda funny. And one last fun fact, Khorne has a wife, Valkia the Bloody. She's a Valkyrie, judging those worthy enough to enter Khorne's realm in personal combat. Technically, she's a consort or something, but the phrase Khorne has a wife is funnier to me, so we're going with that. Khorne, in spite of all the things I did say giving him some death, is still overall a fairly simple guy. As much as he can plan ways to corrupt people and win a battle, as can his demons, as is shown in one of the first Gotchick and Felix books, he's also by virtue of his nature a simple guy. Murder that guy over there, and I'll give you a reward. Murder 100 guys, and you get a bigger reward.
Exactly.
Ad infinitum. And in Warhammer, I feel that's an unappreciated value. Everyone either has gone on or is aware of the classic Warhammer wiki dive when you first get into these settings, where you click on a wiki page, scroll down for 3 hours, and then have learned basically nothing because every 3 sentences is a link to another proper noun. You can find all that with Khorne, but you need none of it. The Blood God sits on his throne collecting skulls, blood, and champions to give him more of the first 2 things. There you go. Now let's move on to the opposite end of that spectrum.
Zinch.
Good old Birdman, god of magic, change, hope, scheming, and all sorts of other things like that. The only thing straightforward about Tzeentch is the magic part. Everything else is asterisk after asterisk anytime you say anything about the asshole. Tzeentch in older lore would have come about around the Renaissance period. All those city-states and rapid upheavals in society, yummy stuff for the changer of ways. There is no big birthing event in the Libra Chaotica that I found, though in full transparency I am reading a PDF of it. Some of the writing is in cursive and written unevenly across the page. Fine idea and great for adding some good vibes to it when you have a written copy, not so great when you're struggling to make out a faded replica of it on the internet. There could be something in there that I just physically cannot read. Tzeentch, however, does have an interesting pseudo-origin story. Once upon a time, he was the mightiest Chaos God. Now, the Chaos Gods all want to win, but more than that, they don't want the others to win.
I didn't know he was like the most powerful one of all of them. How?
So the others broke him apart, and now modern Tzeentch is usually around the second strongest, although who's on top in the great game of the Chaos Gods is naturally always in flux. Let's try and get all the easy things out of the way first, because as much as you can simplify Tzeentch, he's Tzeentch. His lore is a cavalcade of nonsense, and for once it's on purpose that it's like that. As the god of magic, Tzeentch is naturally a patron of the magical arts and scholars. Tzeentch will help those who are interested in furthering their magical power. In fact, that's one of his most common gifts. He rolls up and goes, "Hey kid, you want to be a wizard?" And then bam, you're now the strongest mage in the country.
You're a wizard, Harry.
As a god of scheming, he's also fond of those who are willing to do anything and pull any amount of shit to get what they want. Starscream would be Tzeentch's strongest soldier fighting his backstabbiest battles, no contest. And of course, as a god of hope, he has one of the most insidious ways to gain power and worshippers. Hope is hope, so anyone hoping and doing what they can to improve their lives will feed him. But more so than that, hope isn't necessarily good. A man hoping to achieve his goal of becoming the iron-fisted evil dictator of the world is the perfect grounds for Tzeentch giving him a helping hand, and that kind of hope is what Tzeentch thrives on. Tzeentch is a chaos god. For all that some other aspects can be positive, Tzeentch to me is the great example of those ones being turned negative. Even if you start with pure and noble intentions completely, Tzeentch will be happy to lend you a hand. Because as the master of schemes and backstabbing, he's more than happy to wait patiently while you ruin yourself.
Yeah, because you're changing.
Early on, his gifts might even be completely free of charge, or at least with no major strings attached. You start noticing you're thinking a bit more clearly, solutions to problems come just a bit faster. If you weren't a wizard, you are now, and if you are a wizard, you're a much better one. Egrim van Horstman, a light wizard, experienced this himself. Early on, Tzeentch's end of the deal wasn't too bad when he dealt with them. He was a bit marked by Tzeentch, but it seemed that Egrim came out of the deal on top. Then he dug himself into a hole, and this is how Tzeentch gets his claws in you. The people that come to Tzeentch can in theory be do-gooders trying to do right, and they'll turn into monsters by way of some classic tragedy circumstances. See the endless stream of failure that is Azek Araman. But even with that, his favorite people are those cutthroat folks that hope for their own future to be better at the expense of whoever it takes. Because while Tzeentch may have to do a bit of work to make a paragon fall, all he has to do to make already major assholes wholly indebted to him is to wait for them to dig themselves a hole they can't get out of without selling their soul to Tzeentch. Now with that being said, I'm gonna get into some negative stuff here. Tzeentch followers, and perhaps most of all Tzeentch fans, tend to promote Tzeentch as this all-powerful being who could totally win everything ever at any time. The only reason he doesn't is as a god of scheming, there'd be no one left to scheme against, and he'd fade away. Sounds fine in theory, and that'd certainly make a powerful enemy, but it's also utter nonsense. I've talked about this before, but now for a dedicated video on the Chaos Gods, here it is again. I like to complain, probably because I'm short and therefore dwarf blood flows through my veins. Look at Kairos Fateweaver. Tzeentch threw him into whatever magical black hole of knowledge he did because Tzeentch didn't have perfect knowledge of everything. If he needed to do that, then there's already one strike against Tzeentch being all-knowing or all-powerful, because he wouldn't have thrown Kairos in if he didn't need to. For another, that classic bit of everything is canon, nothing is true. Tzeentch cultists telling you Tzeentch is all-powerful and could do anything if he really wanted to is a fun little mix of insanity, bias, and almost certainly no small amount of coping for them selling their souls and trying to convince themselves they picked the winning team. Of course,
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, that bird, two-headed bird dude we just saw, he sent him to learn everything about the future, the past, and the present, or something like that, and it turned him crazy.
Of course, they're going to tell you Tzeentch is all-powerful. He's the one holding them by the balls. He may be all-powerful as far as they're concerned, but not all of reality. Sometimes mention will be made of Lords of Change having total knowledge of basically whatever, unless Tzeentch specifically interferes with them to give them wrong information, which itself is usually part of one of Tzeentch's greater plans. If that were true, then why does Kairos Fateweaver exist? His whole thing is he knows everything, but if Lords of Change already know everything, then why would he need to exist? Tzeentch at his worst like this comes across as how an idiot writes a smart character, where it doesn't matter how bad he loses or if he actually does anything smart. The writer just has to add the words "just as planned" to the end of the story, and then suddenly, oh, look at that, everything is proceeding exactly as Tzeentch has foreseen. Or they make everyone else stupid, and Tzeentch is smart because he's an average intelligence being in a universe of inbred morons. See, for example, there, Magnus the Red. To be fair, this can still be done well. If it's ever acknowledged in universe, this can be just another layer of lies that Tzeentch weaves. If your enemy thinks you're all-powerful, then you might as well be. After all, what's the point of combating an all-powerful enemy? You
Makes sense.
physically can't win. And Libra Chaotica does address this in a way. Tzeentch may have complete knowledge of all possible outcomes. Every single infinitesimally small difference that can occur is known to him, but he doesn't know for certain which outcome is coming. He can manipulate events to get the one he wants. He can probably cut entire strands of fate out of reality on a whim, but he can't get all of them, and he doesn't know which one is guaranteed to happen until it does, because none of them are guaranteed. And once again, if he did, then why do we have Kairos Fateweaver? Or why would he send the blue scribes out to record all the spells they can if Tzeentch already knew all of them? I feel like I kinda got sidetracked there, so let's get back to some more descriptive stuff. Tzeentch doesn't have any set appearance. Kind of like the Daedric princes, the Chaos Gods don't really have any actual gender or true appearance. Tzeentch takes this to the logical extreme, rather like Hermaeus Mora. He can be a weird squid octopus thing, he can be thousands of eyes all staring down at you, he could appear as a totally normal being, I'm sure, because what better way to trick people as the God of Change than to appear as a totally normal dude? It's Warhammer, we judge how important someone is by how much random garbage they're covered in. If some person in nothing but a blank cloak and some peasant clothes walks by you, you aren't gonna think they're Tzeentch. And as rude and dismissive as I was of his ultimate abilities, Tzeentch is still the classic deal with the devil kind of god. You aren't going to be coming out on top against him. I promise you that smarter people than you have tried and failed. You're going to come out minus your soul, your sanity, or both. Whether it's because of a loophole or just because you think you can handle it, you're going to end up in Tzeentch's claws sooner or later. And him being a god of magic, since I contest him being the god of magic, means there's always a little bit of his influence creeping in whenever a spell is cast. Psyker powers or fantasy wizardry, Tzeentch knows you're casting spells, and he's happy for you. Even if you're casting it against him, he's always looking to see a talented wizard do well. After all, that's another potential follower of his in the making. Tzeentch's gifts do come at the highest potential cost, however. As the god of magic and change, which in Warhammer often means mutation, Tzeentch's gifts are the hardest to handle without the risk of becoming a chaos spawn. And it doesn't end at him being the greatest source of skill issues on the quest to ultimate power either. As a god of change, he likes to see what happens when he just pokes around a little bit. Add a bit of extra chaos energy here or there, experiment a little. So he might turn you into a chaos spawn for a laugh, or because he's bored. Even if not, he still has the highest rate of mutation amongst all the Chaos Gods. You are going to have tentacles and extra eyes, and overall are going to look pretty unpleasant after a few years of serving the Changer of Ways. He's also a fan of survival of the fittest in his own way, because few things please him more than one of his followers managing to screw over another one of his followers. It shows who has the sharper mind, so don't be surprised if you get ganked by your supposed allies, and the last thing you see is Tzeentch congratulating them. I am positive that Tzeentch would have a field day in the Free Worlds League. Or he might not do any of that and will give you unlimited power because his plan needs you to have it. Or he's experimenting again. Or he's just bored again and wants to see what happens when you give some random bozo god mode. You never
Give a noob god mode. But I'll try not to pause too much.
never know what you're going to get with Tzeentch because I don't think Tzeentch knows what Tzeentch's next move is half the time. Good luck, because you'll need it. Because of this and the fact that aside from magic, the benefits of Tzeentch worship are the least tangible ones, he has the least amount of mortal followers. After all, you can't really quantify becoming smarter, but you can quantify your bench record for Khorne, if you're feeling less pain or not for Nurgle, or how much of whatever hedonistic shit you want you have more of for Slaanesh. But those who manage to keep themselves in Tzeentch's favor, or at least keep themselves from becoming too noticed by him, will find power, knowledge, and foresight unrivaled by almost any other. Tzeentch thinks Khorne is a savage brute who's easily manipulated, and doesn't care for Slaanesh because it's hard to plan a decades-long scheme to destabilize the realm when you're too busy furiously masturbating to pinups of the Eldar gods. Trust me, I would know. Tzeentch wants you to improve yourself no matter the cost, not sit there and accept your status as a fat, smelly blob, so those two don't get along much. Tzeentch's little home in the realm of chaos is naturally a twisting place of madness and insanity. The crystal labyrinth of Tzeentch is a constantly moving, constantly changing, permanently in flux realm of insanity that would make Shia Gorath proud. It's utter nonsense, and it's said that you need to be insane to even begin hoping to traverse it. Of course, there's lore that a small girl and her dog made it through and thoroughly embarrassed its guardian, and I'm almost 100% sure that's supposed to be Dorothy and Toto, but hey, old Warhammer was funny like that. Click your heels 3 times, say there's no place like home, and you too can embarrass the god of fate. In fantasy, Tzeentch doesn't really do anything.
I didn't know that. That's it's pretty funny. A girl and a dog got out of his maze.
Tzeentch is kind of the odd man out when it comes to the Chaos Gods over there. Him trapping Sigmar in the Vortex is funny end times lore that I'm convinced was made just so Tzeentch could say he did something. He's more active in 40k, but I'm entirely convinced that's because the Thousand Sons are Space Marines, and so Tzeentch has to occasionally be plot relevant. There is an interesting thing about the fall of the Eldar with him, however. The other 3 Chaos Gods all claimed at least one Eldar god. Slaanesh obviously wanted all of them, but Khorne claimed Cain and Nurgle claimed Isha. Tzeentch seemingly wasn't really doing anything of that sort, but he's a god of scheming, remember? And if you take a look at the Eldar pantheon, you'll take a notice that the only one to make it out unscathed was Kegarak, the laughing god of the Harlequins, and a deity who's not at all hard to connect to Tzeentch for at least a few similarities. Is Kegarak getting away part of Tzeentch's scheme? Did he help Kegarak out because he's the galaxy's greatest comedian and Tzeentch didn't want to miss out on some banging jokes? Or is Tzeentch once again just being ignored? Only time will tell, and honestly, I have no idea if this will go anywhere. It would be an easy way to once again let GW go Chaos actually did it the whole time, but any actual lore on this subject would require an Eldar storyline to be advanced or acknowledged, and we know that isn't happening. Tzeentch is overall a tricky little prick, but that's his charm. Done poorly, he's stupid people claiming to be smart. Done well, he's a master manipulator who's always a few steps ahead and is an inherent threat to anyone with even the slightest inkling of magical power. I'm not the biggest fan of him, and that's more so because I'm an idiot. Math make my brain hurty, and I think I just feel bad backstabbing someone. Let's move on to smellier gods now.
Oh,
Chaos god of life, decay, disease, and entropy. In older 40k lore, his birth was supposedly around the time of the Black Death and early European trips to America, where respectively 50% and 90% of those continents died due to sickness. And ever since then, Nurgle has been a fat, ugly presence on the galaxy. Or he's been around forever and also never, because chaos is eternal crap. I don't know. Nurgle's a jovial guy. In his most generous interpretations of him, he's very straightforward. He, out of the Chaos Gods, doesn't seek to corrupt and destroy because he's a prick. He does it because he's a god of life, but in the sickly and pestilent kind of way. The kind of life he loves is viruses, bacteria, and plagues. As much as we don't think of getting sick as a life-giving thing, it is microorganisms spreading and proliferating in your body. Nurgle loves those little guys as much as he loves you, and he wants everyone to be a part of his family, from the smallest bacteria and nurgling to the greatest of great unclean ones. This is indeed why, despite being a god of despair, he's happy, as are his worshippers. Have you ever been so sick that you just wished for death? According to my analytics, I'd guess that 90% of my audience has, because there's nothing more agonizing than being a man with a minor to moderate cold.
Yeah.
Nurgle reaches out to those at the depths of their agony and despair and offers them salvation. Not in turning their lives around, but in accepting that things simply suck and you may as well learn to be content with it. That's also how the insidiousness of him comes around. Nurgle isn't giving out warm and cuddly hugs, or at least not just that. He's telling you to wallow in despair until you give up and accept that everything is shit, so you may as well become a diseased monster who's covered in shit. Few people who join Nurgle do so because they want to be part of that family. In spite of what his followers will tell you, most people don't like being sickly, ugly monsters. No small amount of the Death Guard hate their predicament, and Typhus had to trap them in the warp in order for them to fall to Nurgle. Those are not the actions of a god who has your best interest in mind, in spite of what his demons will tell you. People join Nurgle's family because in their minds they have nothing else to turn to, and oftentimes they're in their horrible positions because Nurgle's plagues have robbed them of their health and sanity. Still though, Nurgle is the only Chaos God who will forgive you and let you try and get back in his good graces.
Yeah.
When Kugath Plaguefather fell into his cauldron and drank it all to become a great unclean one, Nurgle just laughed at the silly little fellow who did ruin his greatest work and went right back to it. When the Glotkin failed to completely conquer Altdorf and kill Karl Franz, he did turn them into flies and lock them in a jar, but he forgave them eventually and let them roam free once more. That second example to me at least absolutely reeks of an abusive relationship, and I've no doubt that's intentional, but at least Nurgle will forgive you and won't punish you for absolutely no reason.
Yeah, old Grandpa Nurgle, he's a merciful Chaos God, it seems like.
Skarbrand has been trying to get back into Khorne's graces forever, and it'll never work. In Total Warhammer 3's narrative campaign, Skarbrand gives Khorne the skull of an actual god, and that's still not enough. Nurgle will eventually forgive you once he calms down, and it is actual forgiveness. Abusive forgiveness, but that's still more than any other Chaos God will grant you. Nurgle's gifts come with the greatest potential downside of them all, however. Once you accept his sweaty embrace, you become immune to pain and kind of immune to sickness. You're still a disease-ridden puss bag, but you can't feel your insides becoming your outsides in every way you can imagine that happening. If you get caught off from the warp somehow, however, such as some poor fellas found out was possible in a battle against the Necrons, you're so beyond screwed it isn't even funny. All the collective agony you should have been feeling is going to come ramming back into you all at once. Ooh. Potentially tens of thousands of years of rotting and decaying will hit whatever's left of your nervous system and soul in one big painful blast. To be fair, things that turn off the warp aren't exactly common. Even the Tyranid shadow in the warp doesn't always cut the warp off outright, it just drowns out your connection to it a bit in a sea of screaming bugs. But if it does happen, that immunity to pain and whatnot is gonna go away, and you'll probably start melting on the spot. Nurgle's position in the Chaos hierarchy, rather surprising for a god of stagnation, is very fluid. When plagues are spreading everywhere and cultures are dying out, he's the strongest Chaos God around, but when everyone's in the middle of a golden age and healthcare is good, Nurgle becomes the weakest. Overall, he's usually in third place, but he moves up and down surprisingly often. It's also a nice little brain teaser when you think about it, right? Nurgle comes into power with a big plague, but that's a change in the status quo, which would help Tzeentch out a lot. So Tzeentch can potentially overtake Nurgle there, which would mean Nurgle's forces have stagnated, which would mean they're theoretically at their best. Although I think perhaps in this singular instance of Chaos lore, you're not supposed to think about it that much. Nurgle's kind of been on the up and up in real life, and no, that's not a 2020 joke. GW seems to be loving using Nurgle more and more often nowadays. Them and the Ultramarines were of course the armies of the Dark Imperium box, and aside from that, Nurgle's been the main villain force of both Darktide, Vermintide, and that new Chaos Gate. Even going back to the end times, it was Nurgle's forces that overran most of the Empire with plagues, particularly Altdorf, which they flooded with pus, if memory serves correctly. Nurgle's a surprisingly active guy nowadays, it would seem. Charitably, it's nice to see GW has given some of the other three gods time to shine. Less charitably, maybe it's because a gross sick guy is easier to sell to parents than a man covered in skulls and blood. Nurgle might in fact be the most active Chaos God, although not in the most direct of ways. He spends his time cooking up diseases in his cauldron, trying new formulas, testing them on various races. He's a guy who likes to experiment with his cooking. Whereas Khorne waits because he knows blood will come to him, and Tzeentch waits because he's got 500 different schemes going on all at once, Nurgle waits because he's a jovial guy who knows everything ends eventually, so he might as well spend his time gardening and cooking up a real banger of a disease. Sure, it isn't glorious carnage or a dazzling magical show, but when those diseases hit the mortal world, you bet your ass you'll feel Nurgle's influence.
Yeah.
Even if it isn't one of his direct creations, sickness empowers him, so just by virtue of how civilization works, he'll get his due sooner or later. The flip side of him being shown more often is that Nurgle has become a bit of a punching bag in a few ways, although certainly not to the extent of someone like poor old Kayla Mencha Kane. Instead, it's more because if you're the guy featuring in all the products coming out, you're gonna be losing the most, just because you keep showing up. In the end times, the Glotkin got jarred, and of course the Plague Wars ended with Mortarion in trouble with Nurgle because he pursued a grudge match with Guilliman well past what Nurgle wanted him to do. The worst of it is in Vermintide and Darktide, where a group of 4 or 5, it doesn't matter, goobers slaughter tens of thousands of his followers during the course of an afternoon. But that's just how the formula goes more than anything there. You make a Left 4 Dead clone, whoever the infected equivalent here is going to come away looking a bit weak. It happened to Tzeentch in Space Marine 2, with Titus and co slaughtering what seems to be the entire Thousand Sons Legion save Ahriman and Magnus. It's just how these things go. Nurgle's section of the Realm of Chaos is of course Nurgle's Garden. It's a lush lush, life-rich environment where demons roam free and everything is almost certainly covered in a layer of slime and smells like fart. Relatedly to Nurgle being explored and used more frequently, this seems to be the realm of one of the Chaos Gods most often explored by others. A group of Eldar Farseers psychically manifested in the garden to rescue Isha once and started burning it down until the sickness in their bodies caused their souls to become stuck there. A Stormcast Eternal not only ended up there once, but looked upon Nurgle himself and felt very small and insignificant for having done so. Technically, he wasn't even the first one to do so. Someone who was thought to be Kaldar Drago, but was retconned to be a Stormcast, showed up along some fantasy characters in Nurgle's garden during the end times. This place is gross, weird, and apparently loves time travelers. On that last bit, though, the Pox Fulcrum. This is a being Nurgle keeps in his garden to test all his diseases out on. In fantasy, it was once believed to be anything from a demon of cleanliness or some shit like that to a goddess of healing, of which the latter was confirmed true when it was revealed Shalia was the goddess in there. In 40k, it's Isha. Poor old Isha was rescued from Slaanesh only to be given a life of being force-fed diseases so Nurgle can watch how they affect her. Since she's a more traditionally good life goddess, she always heals up, and Nurgle can try again to test his next batch of diseases on her. You know what's bad for Isha? Because if you go online, you'll never find anyone giving her the usual treatment of disliking her because she's an elf/Eldar. Everyone just feels bad for her. Nurgle's a deceptively jovial guy. When you pray to him, he'll answer more often than not. He likes to help. But much like Tzeentch, you might not like what that prayer is. Pray for rain and he'll send you a nice shower to end the drought. The water's gonna be filled with cholera, but that's just how he rolls. He won't betray you, he won't take away his gifts outright, and he'll always forgive you. He just wants you to accept who you are as a person because he loves you just the way you are. Who cares if your skin starts turning green with sewage water flowing through it? Nurgle doesn't. Join his happy little family today for a more comfortable tomorrow. Don't worry, after a few days tops, you won't be able to smell why it was a bad idea any longer.
Yeah.
The last of the big four Chaos Gods, and the one whose birth date has never been changed, at least in 40k. Slaanesh came about from the fall of the Eldar, when those space elves who were being a tad too hedonistic about life murder-fucked her into existence, and now it's everyone's problem. Before you do the usual blaming of the Eldar for that, consider that by Elder lore, that's one Eldar Chaos God for 3 human Chaos Gods. And either way, you can blame the Necrons and Old Ones for killing so many things that the Sea of Souls turned into the Warp and gave rise to the conditions that would eventually birth Slaanesh. Slaanesh is the Chaos God/Goddess of excess, plain and simple. Sure, you can throw in pleasure and joy if you really want, but excess is how she was born, and excess is how she gets her power. She's also the goddess of censorship, because YouTube will kill you depending on which art of hers on screen at any given moment if it isn't at least a little bit hidden in some way. Slaanesh's way of corrupting people and indeed leading her forces on a day-to-day basis is very simple. Do what you want, when you want, how you want. Even more so than Nurgle, Slaanesh doesn't want you to stop being you. She won't make you a diseased freak or give you 3 extra tentacle arms or demand you get more skulls. She won't ask a single goddamn thing from you other than you keep being yourself and having fun. If you like a nice bit of smoking like Gandalf, then smoke away. She'll give you all the cigs in the world. But eventually you'll get bored of it, so she'll whisper in your ear that, hey man, I bet if you add this little something to it, it'll be crazy. So you do, and it's fun. You enjoy it, and you get bored eventually, so you escalate a little bit more. And then a little bit more. And then suddenly you escalate a whole lot more, and you're smoking the ashes of the homeless shelter you burned down, wrapped in an Eldar skin joint, because you wanted to see what that kind of thing would do for you. Slaanesh's evil comes from the simple fact that too much of a good thing is the hardest concept for people to get to grasps with. Oh sure, everyone says you don't want too much of a good thing, but then you have that good thing and you want more of it. It's a good thing, of course you want more. In real life, this is how you end up 12 beers deep, a dime bag down, and talking to someone about a subject you know nothing about for 30 minutes straight. In Warhammer, this is how you end up with crab claws, a mouth stretched way too wide because it lets you yell louder, and pink-purple skin. Slaanesh lets your own sinful nature run its course. She'll give you everything you want with no strings attached. The strings are your own sins piling up on each other because, as it turns out, most people do not have the willpower to say no to someone offering to give them $1 trillion, the finest of foods and entertainment, and a 2-foot cock. Excess can come in any number of ways. I always like to imagine a Slaaneshi follower who's excessive in peace and quiet. Someone who will murder the entirety of a planet's population to create the perfect sensory deprivation room, because you are not going to be disturbing their perfect sanctuary. And of course, there's also the classic sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Yes, you can be excessive in all sorts of ways, and it's lovely to see things like the model of the guy whose back has been turned into a harp, but the picture on screen right now is the most relatable image I've ever seen. I have no doubt a good portion of people watching this would fold like laundry if Slaanesh tempted you with a very pretty person of your preferred sex.
My dick has led me places that a gun wouldn't follow.
No judgment, I probably would too. Slaanesh has the dubious honor, however, of being the potential man of the Chaos Gods. She can totally eclipse the others in power, the other gods totally fear her potential. To be fair, chaos is an obsessive thing. Khorne obsesses over skulls and blood, Nurgle is plagues, Tzeentch is magic and scheming. Slaanesh takes a little bit of power from the acts others' followers commit, and it does sometimes unnerve the other Chaos Gods. Plus, during her birth in 40k, she was briefly the strongest god in the setting. But this has also been perhaps the most tell-don't-show thing in all of Warhammer. Aside from corrupting decadent nobles and the Emperor's Children, she doesn't really do shit in 40k. Go away, Emperor's Children fans, you know I'm right. Beating up the Ynnari doesn't count because they're the Ynnari. I could probably beat the Ynnari in a fight, you don't get an award for it. In Age of Sigmar, she's still in jail. After the end time, she was bloated and tired from voring the elves of the setting. Then Teclis, Tyrion, Marathi, and Malekith found her and started literally beating the elves out of her, locking her up in a space between realms, and that's largely been her lot. Slaanesh could one day overtake the Chaos Gods, but she's the least child-friendly of the bunch, so I'm afraid that will never happen, Slaanesh fans. In universe, Slaanesh of course hates Khorne the most. Whoever a Chaos God hates them the most in return. But Slaanesh also has a vested interest in the pointy ears of Warhammer. In 40k, it's taken to the most extreme, with Slaanesh having an inherent tug on all Eldar souls due to the circumstances of her birth. If proper precautions aren't taken, then on their deaths, an Eldar is automatically schlorped into Slaanesh to be damned for all eternity. Out of all the Eldar groups, only the Dark Eldar deserve it, since everyone else is descended from the Eldar not doing insane hedonism stuff, but sins of the Father and all that. Soulstones prevent this, and the Ynnari's connection to Iniad means they don't even have to wear Soulstones as long as their connection isn't disrupted. But by and large, if you die as an Eldar, you go to Slaanesh if you weren't wearing your soul condom. In fantasy, meanwhile, this is present, but much less so. There's no inherent draw pulling elves to Slaanesh. It's more so that elves are just Slaanesh's favorite treat, her preferred snack when she's hanging out in her palace watching reality TV. She isn't even the only goddess in fantasy that loves stealing elf souls, and the deceased elves do have a variety of ways to keep the influence of both of these deities at bay. This also means that elves can worship Slaanesh in fantasy, Marathi and older lore being the most prominent of them. In 40k, an Eldar worshipping Slaanesh would almost certainly just evaporate into her on the spot. In fantasy, meanwhile, Marathi was one of her chief priestesses before it was retconned. Demonettes oftentimes are even made out of the souls of dead elves, and I have to imagine that at least sometimes that was a reward on Slaanesh's part. And while I admit it has been a while since I read this bit, so I may be misremembering things, there's supposedly hints that some of the elf souls recovered in Age of Sigmar from her are actually Eldar souls, which is neat. Slaanesh's realm in Chaos is the Palace of Pleasure. It's layered in rings, with each ring being a sin to tempt you into staying there forever, because something temptation 7 deadly sins. Once upon a time, a Space Marine or Grey Knight made it nearly the whole way through to kill Slaanesh. Then when he finally saw her, he couldn't resist that final temptation and became one of her champions. You have to admire the balls on the guy for trying to pull something like that off. In fact, almost no one who sees Slaanesh can resist becoming one of her servants on the spot. Only Archaon, and likely the previous Ever-Chosens going through the trials, have really managed it. Fabi's Bile kind of did, but that was more of Slaanesh's shadow than anything. Still an incredible showing of willpower to resist even that, but it wasn't the full deal. Slaanesh is the odd god out in a lot of ways, for good and bad. She has to do the least amount of work to corrupt anyone, because almost everyone wants more. She may not even directly change you, unwillingly at least. I'd put decent money on someone heavily mutated by Slaanesh's gifts having asked for it, and Chaos spawns formed this way just couldn't handle what they wished for. She has the potential to eclipse all the others, and even in jail, she still grows ever closer to escaping in Age of Sigmar. But she's also the only Chaos god in jail. Her shining moment of glory was eating a bunch of elf gods who've never really been in 40k's narrative beyond background details, and because her followers tend to be coked out degenerates, she isn't exactly marketing friendly. Thus, Slaanesh will forever be the 40k potential man. You know what, scratch that. The Warhammer potential man. 0 actual meaningful wins beyond what things like the Horus Heresy forced to occur by plot, 0 people in real life outside her fanbase to consider her the greatest threat, 7 circle of sins in her palace that anyone who played Warhammer 3's narrative campaign ignored with 0 effort on their part. Can you tell I'm biased because of the factions I prefer? On the bright side, everyone in her realm is too busy making paintings out of human feces and cranking their hog to actually care about this. So hey, if you like to go with the flow, and the flow just so happens to be made out of super heroin, probably not a bad option of gods to worship. You
Oh,
didn't
here
think
we
I
go.
would forget Skip greatest.
This is the one I was waiting on. I'm a big Skaven fan. The Great Horned Rat.
Best Chaos God, did you? The Horned Rat, as he was in Warhammer Fantasy, is the Skaven's own patron Chaos God, and he's pretty much that in Age of Sigmar too. He hasn't changed too much. Theories used to abound as to whether or not he was his own thing as some minor Chaos God, a demon of Tzeentch or Nurgle that escaped to do his own thing, somehow both, but one thing is certain. This rat has an ironclad grip on the Skaven race as their sole deity. It's actually kind of funny that the only race in fantasy to truly practice something approaching monotheism is the Skaven. It is entirely out of fear to the rattiest of rats, however. This isn't because they love him. The Horned Rat is the god of the Skaven and embodies all their tendencies. To translate, he's a tremendous asshole who hates you, hates the Skaven, loves watching things suffer, and would love to see himself brought above everyone else as the Vermintide sweeps over the land. Also much like the Skaven, he wildly oscillates between being one of the most powerful things around and being a punching bag for everyone close to him. Let's be nice to him first. The Horned Rat is one of the few gods in Warhammer to regularly appear in the mortal world. He's done it a few times in fantasy, always followed by him eating a bunch of Skaven alive when he shows up.
Yeah.
In the Total Warhammer 2 campaign, you can see him hanging around during the final battle, waiting to bring his people to victory
Oh,
and
that's
glory.
cool.
He was strong enough to essentially force himself into becoming a proper Chaos God in Age of Sigmar, one who, whether they like it or not, the rest have to treat as at least somewhat an equal. He has a presence that in many ways is unmatched by any other, and combined with how prolific his followers of the Skaven are, means absolutely nowhere is truly beyond his reach. On the other hand, he gets his shit kicked in by Sotek, his followers are regularly obliterated because the Skaven are universally incompetent, and most humiliating of all was some of his early Age of Sigmar lore. The Chaos Gods were all giving Archaon some more blessings once upon a time. He's Archaon, he's a cool dude like that who'd earned them. When the now great Horned Rat went to bless the Ever-Chosen, Archaon spat in his face and refused it. There is no amount of power and glory that can make the great Horned Rat any more of a pathetic asshole than any other Skaven is, and everyone knows this. His personal realm is the realm of ruin. It's like Skaven Blight if Skaven Blight was all of a reality, which technically is now partially true, with Skaven Blight being half submerged into the realm of chaos in Age of Sigmar. Aside from looking like the biggest dumpster in all of history, there's said to be a Vermilord there for every Skaven that exists, which damn, that's a lot of greater demons, like trillions of them. Still though, in spite of him being pretty pathetic, he's a Chaos God. He may be a Skaven in personality and just so happens to be a divine one, but he's still a god who's in Age of Sigmar taken Slaaneish's place as the 4th main one outright. And much like the Skaven, you should never underestimate him, because you're either going to find out what it's like when the Skaven are portrayed as horrifying, or you're going to completely dumpster him only for his schemes to blow up in your face as much as they blow up in his. Remember, Thanquol is a Skaven too, and the Great Horned Rat loves his funny little guy. That alone is reason enough to respect the Great Horned Rat. If you don't, Warhammer's funniest clown thing is gonna pay you a visit, and you aren't Gotrek. And those are the big 4 Chaos Gods of Warhammer, with a guest appearance from the true greatest best one. May you fear them, hate them, or worship them as circumstances require. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the Chaos Warriors to my Chaos Gods, marching forth and bringing ruin in my name. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thanks for watching, and take care out there.
That was a good video. So, if I had to pick, my favorite Chaos God is definitely the Horned Rat, because I'm a big Skaven fan. But he would not accept me unless I was Skaven. So, I'd probably go with Nurgle. I mean, I'd probably look hideous and shit, but I mean, fuck it, no pain. He seems like a very merciful Chaos God. So, I'd go with Grandpa Nurgle. But, I'll probably end it here. That was Pancreas No Work, I think is how you say that. Gods of Warhammer, Chaos Gods, go support him. It was a good video. Very good.